Hello everyone, today I'm presenting some work that we've done within the projects Euphory and Magic Nexus on the implications of embodied working time in trade for the European Union. International trade has determined the current socio-economic configuration of the world. So what happens within the borders of countries doesn't explain everything. Environmental impacts, energy consumption and emissions are displaced by means of trade. But not only that, there are effects on the socioeconomic structure, the salaries, well-being, etc. In this presentation, we want to explore the relation of international trade with working time. We know that the EU is known as a net importing country for large variety of products, materials, energy, and so on. However, it still maintains a large export in monetary terms. In fact, if we put all EU member states together, it is the largest trader in value of trade. So it's telling a different story. We need to explore this in a multidimensional way. In this sense, the implication of trade for variables such as money, energy, greenhouse gas emissions has already been thoroughly analyzed in the last years. Here we are assessing time instead, a fundamental variable for the viability of societies, which is following a different logic. We complement the analysis with the relation to value added and energy consumption with the variables economic job productivity and energy metabolic rate. Our main variable of study in this case is working time. Time in MUSISM is called human activity. In the fund flow scheme of Georges-Couruegen, it is considered a fund. Fund define the size of society, are constant during the period of analysis, in this case a year, and must be maintained. However, this time budget allocation changes in the mid-long term depending on demographics, economics, etc. We know that in our everyday life it is difficult to manage time. It is very easy to feel that we don't have enough time. So there is a clear limit at the individual level and also at the societal level. Time is required for all activities, but we are focusing on paid work. There is a compromise in the allocation of this paid work and the other functions in society. Unpaid work, leisure, education, sleep, etc. In fact, paid work is a rather small percentage of the time of a society. In the EU, we have 770 hours per capita in 2011 of paid work, and this is only about 9% of the total time in a year. In other words, 43% of the total population is working at about 1,800 hours per worker a year. So here we see the demographic pyramid of the EU for 2010. Then the population interval with more population is that of from 40 to 44 years old. Now it would be 50 to 54 years old. And the pyramid is displacing to the right. People between the two blue lines is allowed to work in a broad sense. From that people, there is people who are studying, people who are devoted to unpaid work, and others who are not working. To increase the paid work time, we can rearrange the internal organization. For example, we can increase the retirement age and displace the second blue line to the right. We can mechanize activities using more energy in order to save time, and we can externalize activities so time is embodied in products and services. In the latter, and in the case of the EU, usually this time is cheaper than the local one. The data we present is for the year 2011. We will see the values for the whole of the EU 27 and the reference of the rest of the world. So we are dividing the world in two. An important fact is that the EU represents 41% of the high-income countries and 7% of the total population. This is within the rest of the world, there's still high-income population, a high diversity of countries, and more than 90% of the population. Afterwards, we will see the values per sectors. This could be divided in sectors of material extraction and transformation that are pictured in gray here. And these are agriculture, mining, industry, utilities, and construction, and then services, which we divide in transport and telecommunications, office work, that are within this category we have law, finance, IT, etc., and other services, that's the largest category maybe, with retail, wholesale, hotels, education, government, etc. Job structures help us explain the internal economy. So where is people working? Countries play different roles within the international division of labor, and this is shown in the internal economy. Here we see that the EU, most of the working time is spent in services or in finance and offices, and this represents more than 50% of the time in working time. We don't really see the picture in terms of what the country is consuming. If we compare this first line to the consumption-based picture and the world, we see that material extraction and transformation increases. The world has even more agriculture workers, and this is the category where more people work worldwide. An important point to take into account is that the accounting might not be including many workers in some developing countries who are working in the informal economy or are directly not paid. Moreover, the rest of the world is only taken as a way to have a reference, but it consists of a very diverse set of countries, so some of which have even larger export relations to the world, such as the US, and some developing ones which import and have larger working hours. So this shouldn't be used as a reference for any country. Now we see the results for the embodied working time in trade. The general picture. In this graph, we see the overall working time per capita in consumption and production for the EU and the rest of the world. Consumption is local production and consumption in orange, and imports gray. And then production is the blue bar, which are exports, and the local production and consumption again in orange. Here we see that the average EU citizen is able to consume almost double the time of what European society is allocating to paid work. Imports are 70% of the production time. This import would be equivalent to 136 extra workers at the current EU working hours. So if we would change these working hours and increase them, we would need less workers. But this is a really significant share of the workers that we have nowadays. In the following graphs, we are going to see the disaggregation per sectors. These are the working hours per capita and year for the EU in darker orange, and the rest of the world in clearer colors. This makes comparable the consumption of the average citizen. Negative values are exports in blue, and positive values consumption, which can come from local production in orange or imports in gray. So we see that in general, in material extraction and transformation, there is a large amount and even larger share of imported working hours. And the example of mining is the most important, with 97% of the consumption that is imported. In industry, with 61% of imported working hours in consumption, we see at the same time that the exports are relatively large for the EU. 26% of the local production is exported. We're exporting very specific products that are niche and have limited demand worldwide. And then we here work in services much more than in the rest of the world, as we have seen before. But we are also exporting services and office work in relative large amounts. Here we see the left-hand side economic job productivity. which is a measure that indicates how much value added is generated per hour of work. The graph on the left side has economic job productivities in dark orange for the EU, lighter ones for the rest of the world. In general, we see that the EU has larger economic job productivities than the rest of the world equivalent for all categories. For categories in material extraction and transformation, where there are large imports, we see that the economic job productivity in the rest of the world is very low compared to the local. In the case of the relatively large exports from the EU, this case industry, the average EGP economic job productivity is 4 times that of the rest of the world. This is our industry has higher added value per hour of work. And moreover, other sectors where there are larger exports, the economic job productivity is way larger than in the rest of the world, including finance and offices, where the EGP is the second largest after mining. But compared to mining, it has way more working hours allocated. This means that during the industrialization processes that started some decades ago, the headquarters of multinational companies are kept. So these functions of finance and offices are still here. And also we have companies that are especially focused on this kind of activity. We can connect these working hours to the amount of energy it is used. In this case, it's electricity, but with thermal energy, we would see the same picture. In the right side, we can see the electricity energy metabolic rate per sector, so the electricity per hour of work. We see that in the EU, there is little work in agriculture, mining and industry, but it is very energy intensive in comparison to the rest of the world. This is with the same time we are producing more. Also, the EU has large amounts of work in services where the energy metabolic rates in general are lower. This is a reminder that the decline in energy consumption and emissions can be due to the switch of activities from mining and industry to services. Finally, to wrap up the conclusions, paid work allocation is a zero-sum game, so there is a limited amount of paid work in the world. If someone has net imports, someone must have net exports. We in the EU consume almost double the time that we are investing in paid work. The fact that we are a rather small part of the world matters. What are large inputs of imported time for us per capita are small exports in relative terms for the rest of the world. And then, if development is defined by these large imports of time, not everyone can enjoy it. These imports and mechanization have allowed that we don't work anymore in agriculture, mining, and industry. Working time is not a mere allocation of time. It is linked to out-of-work practices, infrastructure, and abilities. So, a different allocation would require a radical transition, which includes education. Of course, all these issues sum to those that we already knew from other studies in terms of energy and greenhouse gas emissions, for example. And finally, we have some concluding thoughts, questions. Can we think of a reindustrialization of the EU society? The imports of time in goods are an advantage in terms of saving time, money and energy, but also generate a strong dependency on third countries who are producing essential products and services. We have clear examples of medical equipment that was produced basically in China and that generated scarcity and competition during the pandemic. But this could happen with most products we are consuming nowadays. What will happen with developing societies aiming for increasing material prosperity if time allocation is a zero-sum game and this is a requirement for the current pattern of development? And finally, how can European societies adapt to an uncertain future when they are aging and they industrialize, while at the same time increasing sustainability.